Hey everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today I have another recommendation video for you. This time I am recommending 5 feel-good books. These are all books that I think have sweet messages, sweet themes around them, great character work, anything that just warms your heart and makes you feel satisfied at the end and gives you that hopeful feeling that you might be looking for. These are also a great escape if you're, having a rough time and you just need something to put you in a better mood. So hopefully one of these 5 books sounds interesting to you. And without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. The first book I have for you is The Keeper of Lost Things by Ruth Hogan. This is one that I read on a whim several years ago at this point, but it was so adorable and charming. And it follows this man named Anthony, and he called himself the Keeper of Lost Things. And he made a habit of collecting all of these lost things that he would find and writing stories about them. So he had this treasure trove of keepsakes of people's lost things, and he is now getting towards the end of his life. So he decides to pass along this kind of collection to his younger assistant named Laura. She is recently divorced. She's been recently having a really hard time. And so towards the end of his life, he kind of gives her this new mission that is carrying over from his old mission of returning these lost things to these people. So she, along the way of trying to find where to return all of these things, she meets a really charming group of people, a cast of characters. An irritable ghost is in the story, and it is just the sweetest thing because I love Laura and her journey of just finding joy again and finding joy through others' joy. And then the group of people that you get to meet along the way, they're all so much fun, and it just is this really kind of sweet, humorous, quirky little book that I just thought was absolutely adorable. So if you're looking for something very feel-good, very low stakes, not maybe the most exciting or page-turning book, but just something to warm your heart and make you smile at the end, then I highly recommend Keeper of Lost Things. Next book I have is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is a more recent fantasy release from last year, and it is adorable. It is definitely in this new cozy fantasy genre that's starting to gain a lot more popularity. And you're following a woman who has an encounter with a fae. And the fae in this story are not nice. They're not sexy. They're not good people. And this fae essentially makes a deal with her and tears apart her soul and cuts it in half. So she has to carry on with only half a soul. And the half a soul that she has left makes her a little bit more peculiar in social situations, and she doesn't feel this wide range of emotions. Her emotions are much more muted with only half a soul. But the character interactions in this book are just so delightful because of this main character that I love. And the time period this is taking place in is very much like a Victorian England kind of time period. So that was the time where etiquette and proper manners were extremely important. And so by her having these kind of more awkward social skills and not being able to feel these typical emotions, she's a little bit more of an outcast. But she meets this man who just seems to understand her. It's not Grumpy Sunshine because she's not necessarily the most sunshiny of characters, but it's just this adorable little romance starts to bud. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more fantasy romance, a little cozier, I think that this is a great one. You'll just fall in love with the main character. She's so cute, and I loved the writing. It did get a little bit heavier. This isn't necessarily something where it's all sunshine and rainbows the entire book. There's definitely, you know, some low points, but overall, the overall feeling I got from this book was just this lighthearted, sweet, charming little book, and I loved it. It was so cute. It was so cute. So highly recommend Half a Soul. Next one I have is A Man Called Uve, which is by Fredrick Backman, and this is one actually that recently got an adaptation, which I didn't even know was coming. The adaptation is starring Tom Hanks, and it's called A Man Called Otto. So if you've seen that around, it's actually based off of this book of similar name. A Man Called Uve is, if you took the main character from Up, if you are familiar with Disney Pixar, that movie Up, about the grumpy old man who lives in the house and he lifts his house away with all the balloons, take that man, Carl, and make him like the main character of like a contemporary novel. This is A Man Called Uve. You're basically following Carl from Up if he were to stay in his neighborhood, and instead of him leaving with some balloons, he stays and he meets these really sweet neighbors that kind of start to bring him out of his shell and make him a little more warm, a little bit more sympathetic of a character. It's very much a small in scope story that is very focused on characters. There isn't a ton of plot in this one, so I would say if you are a character-driven reader, this is a fantastic one to go to because it just has this very heartwarming message all about kind of finding the joy in life again. I think that this one is a fantastic one. Again, if you're a character-driven reader, there's not much plot to grasp onto in this one. I just always adore Fredrick Backman's characters. They always feel so incredibly real to me. They're very flawed, but you somehow just find yourself absolutely loving them and feeling very connected to them, and that is still the case with this book as well. Even with all of the characters' flaws, you just find yourself by the end so invested and really caring about what happens to them. So definitely check out this one. The next one I have is How to Walk Away by Katherine, which is an author I've been seeing a lot more of recently. Her latest few books have been a little bit more hyped than some of her older works, but this is the one I started with Katherine. I started with How to Walk Away, and I know that her books tend to lean more heavy on the romance, but what I found with this particular book is it actually read a little bit more contemporary to me than romance. So if you're looking for a romance book, I don't necessarily think that this is going to be the recommendation I would give to you, but if you're looking for something that's much more of a contemporary novel with a kind of romantic subplot, but much more about like that character like coming to terms with themselves and a journey of like self-discovery, this is a really good one. You're following a character named Margaret who has this wonderful life. She's got a fiance she loves, she's got her dream job, she's got like the promise of this picture perfect life, and her fiance is a pilot, so she is on a plane with him and they are having like one of the happiest days of their life, but then there is a turn for the worse in the book. And at the very beginning of the book, she actually finds herself in a hospital where she is recovering from some really, really serious injuries that will mean that her life will never be the same again. And so she's kind of figuring out how to come to terms with that, but also how to come to terms with things in her life that she thought was perfect. And it turns out that maybe there was some stuff that she hadn't realized before that she needs to work out. So even though this one kind of at face value sounds not very feel good, I think that her journey, what she has to come to terms with, is just so like hopeful and is such a great story that, you know, anyone can relate to any sort of one piece of it. Everyone kind of goes through those ups and downs, but it's much more about how you go back on the up from those downs. So I like that this story, it's really revolving around like resilience and persistence, and like even at your lowest low, making sure that you have your highest high once again. So I think that that's what makes this one so feel good. It's not the coziest, it's not like the most charming book, but it very much has this hopeful tone that I personally loved. I loved this book. So if that sounds like something that's more up your alley, more of what you're looking for in a feel-good book, then this is a really good one to check out. The last one I have for you is more of a romance, and it is called Evie Drake Starts Over by Linda Holmes. I loved this book. This was such an unexpected surprise for me when I read it. I didn't have any expectations going into it, but I loved it so much. So the main setting of this book is this sleepy seaside town in Maine, and you're following a main character who is very much still recovering from her recent husband's death from a car crash. And so she is like hardly leaving the house. She's having a really rough time. But there's this new guy who moves into town from New York City, and he is this former Major League Baseball player. And so he moves into this town and ends up moving into the apartment at the back of Evie's house. They have, of course, a little bit of a romance, but what I love about this one is it's so much more than just the romance plot that drives the story forward, because you're dealing with a character who is still very much in this vulnerable place from this very recent trauma that she experienced. So you're following her journey, once again, like How to Walk Away, but her journey to kind of recover from that and not relying solely on a man to bring her out of that slump. So it's yes, there's a romance, and I loved that part of the romance, but I also loved that the solution wasn't just like find a new guy. It was like she really had to recover on her own first. She had to be independent and had to come to terms with herself and her own happiness first, and that's what allowed her to then have this chance at a new relationship. So if that premise sounds like something you would really enjoy, I think this one is the most just like romance focused of all of the books that I've recommended. But if that sounds good to you, then I highly recommend this one. Those are the 5 recommendations I have for you today. Have you read any of these? What did you think of them? And then what is a book that you read when you're in a slump, when you're in a bad mood, and you just need something to lift your spirits and make you feel good? What is that book that you go to? Leave those comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye.